And welcome back to the Baseball Development Hub podcast. My name is Trevor Powers, and I am joined, as always, by co-host of the podcast, Dan Galati. Dan, for those that don't know, me and you made a significant accomplishment yesterday.
Yeah, it's home improvement projects. We're better at this, I would say, than home improvement projects. That thing's been hanging over my head for 2 months now. I'm glad we were able to get it done. I am very thankful for your friendship and help. I appreciate that. And it was, listen, any young homeowner out there, you're going to have to learn how to do stuff, which I'm all for. It's going to take you longer than YouTube tells you. But the most important piece of advice is to have the right equipment.
Yeah. Don't cut corners on the equipment is the best way I would say. Is like,
It's expensive,
again,
but you just gotta have it.
both you and I have experienced this. You're still in that, early stages of home improvement where you're still kind of getting the 2 years of cobwebs off of like getting all the projects done when you moved in. First 2 years here in our house was the same thing. I tried to cut corners on savings in terms of equipment, and then you just end up buying another piece of wood because you didn't have the right saw or you didn't measure twice because you're trying to do it cheap and whatnot. It's just one of those things where if you ever have the opportunity to purchase a, let's just say, angular saw to cut angles, you spend the money it costs to do it because it's going to make your angle cuts straight better, not using protractors, right? Like to figure out what the angle is. All these things that Dan and I had to do over the last 2 months was saved. A project that took us, 6 hours the first time in December took us a total of 2 to start from scratch.
Dude, how stupid easy it was when you have the right equipment is really funny. And it's like one of those
No,
times where it's like, oh, okay.
Nobody's ever going to question the level of teamwork that you and I are when we spend our Saturdays doing home improvement projects and then spend our Sundays talking on a podcast and spend our weekdays talking about whatever, traveling the country all over the places. We don't fake this when we hop on here at
No.
all. We actually spend our Saturdays working on home improvement. And I have a sidewalk that I'm probably going to drag Dan into at some point when the weather finally clears here.
Can't wait.
So
Yeah, we have the outside stuff that we're gonna have to do together this year. We got a lot of stuff on the list, so that'll be fun. It's always a
a
good
lot of
time
fun.
though. Vibes never I'm always impressed because the vibes never really get too low.
No, it's a lot easier though, I must say, when you're there or when it's because when it's just me, the frustration does tend to boil over
It's
a little bit
it's
more.
insane.
But as having a little bit of somebody, and I don't even know if I'd say it's support. It's more of just like a person who's going to judge me if I slam something or break a piece of wood over my knee. It's probably not going to be taken over very well. So it is a lot easier to keep your cool when you're in those moments, and it's not just you standing there in just frustration because of whatever comes up.
I don't know if I would judge you. I think it's more so just like having someone to bounce ideas off of. And so
It's
it's like,
true.
because when you do it on your own, you like start to feel crazy because like you get so stuck in like, shouldn't it be? And then to have someone to be like, no, well, there's another way to see this or do this, and um, yeah, it's
Also, and let's call it what it is, when your feedback at home doing something by yourself is a significant other whose father happens to be able to do whatever they want, whether it's in your scenario, build actual homes by with his hands and his equipment, or like my situation, build outdoor kitchens and whatever they decide to do. It makes the hanging of a door frame, they act like it's supposed to be like folding laundry. Like it's like, what do you mean you can't do this in 16 seconds with the equipment that you have and being able to do that? So that is also part of the equation as well, and we
you
appreciate the
don't
feedback.
inherently
But
know how to do this. No,
yeah,
I do not.
exactly. No, no, I'm learning just like everybody else. I inherently know how to talk about baseball, which is what we feel like we actually do well in this world. So it's a big accomplishment for Dan and I, for the Backside Ground Balls team over here. But we're going to spend today talking about a little bit more of our expertise, and maybe our father-in-laws might come for us advice on this if they ever have to get into conversation about the impact of the roster reduction on personnel management and in-season development. that I find this very fascinating because it's something we've talked about in passing with a lot of coaches, right? Is as we've heard, with the legislation and the changing of the times of roster reductions. And obviously that's had the added benefit of roster increases for a lot of programs and the ability to determine whether you're beyond 11.7 or not. All of those things are positives for the sport and giving players the opportunity to get their education for free. But the reality of it is in an era of baseball, and this is the way I always kind of give this, excerpt, is in an era of baseball where Major League Baseball rosters are growing because arm injuries are so prevalent, and we're making 7-day IL stints and all of these things to prevent injuries, and specifically arm injuries. College baseball and the NCAA said, we're going to go the opposite direction, right? Every baseball league is allowing for more rest, more opportunity to rotate roster spots and make sure these guys stay healthy and get their workload management that they need. And now college baseball has just created a system that now we're going to have to expose our guys to more, right? More pressure on their arm, less opportunity to rest and recover, more of those times on short rest and those factors that come into play. So when you think about the roster management and the reduction of rosters, especially a week out from opening day for college baseball, what are the first couple things that come to your mind when you're talking about personnel management and then obviously the in-season development piece?
I think how valuable roster spots became with this. In the past, you would have, you know, at every level programs that had guys that were kind of developmental pieces, guys that were wait and see, guys who maybe weren't good enough to contribute right away, but it's not a problem. We might see a future for them somewhere. Um, some cases, probably favors were done for some roster spots, depending on, connections, who college roommate, things like that. Their son, you throw them a roster spot, they might not be able to contribute in a capacity that helps you, necessarily win or whatever. I don't know. Everyone had a different circumstance, but I think that now with the roster crunch, every roster spot is much more valuable. You don't have the luxury of taking a young guy and saying, hey, if he doesn't contribute for 3 years, it's not that big of a deal. Or, hey, I can do this person a favor. There's probably some uncomfortable conversations that have to be had because every roster spot now, you need to be able to, in some form or fashion, help the team win. And that kind of can make things a little more challenging. You have to be sharper in your recruiting. But I also think that's why the transfer portal, it makes sense that this change came during such a time of transient rosters where guys are bouncing all around every single offseason, because you can flip a roster. If you do a bad job the year before, you can flip your roster and bring in a whole bunch more portal guys. But it also, unfortunately, and like the sad part of this is like some guys need you to be patient, and you have to find a program that is still willing to do that. I think they're out there. You just have to find them. There are less of them for sure. But if you're a high school guy who needs a significant development, it's going to be harder for you to find a program that's patient and will let you kind of get your feet wet, build the maturity, build the confidence to where you can help, because, you might come in and have promise, but for whatever reason, might not have a great first year on campus. You're probably at a school who says, we're going to have to move on, and maybe even give you a push towards the portal because they need to compete to win. And that's kind of the balance that there always is. Coaches need to win to save their jobs. Guys have to be able to contribute to that.
Mm-hmm. From the player standpoint and from the transactional nature that college baseball is slowly and actually rapidly becoming with the NIL and this decision, 100%. I think from a recruiting standpoint, it's massive on freshmen and being able to make it to your sophomore year at the said university that you commit to be able to make it through the fall. Like, let's call it what it is. I think we could all probably reach out to somebody who knows somebody who's in a scenario where they thought they had an opportunity at every level of college baseball, whether it's Power Four or whether it's low level Division One, who had to find a home at the break, right? All of these things that are realities of the new landscape are going to be a part of the puzzle. And I think that brings me to a point that you made in terms of how valuable these roster pieces are, each number on the roster, 1 through 34 is, and how valuable they have to be in what they're able to provide. And I think that changes what coaches have to prioritize in terms of the bottom of the roster. Whereas 3 to 5 years ago, if I was a Division I recruiting coordinator and I saw a kid who was just tall with long arms and he's 160 pounds soaking wet, but he had 87 in the tank and a really good feel for a breaking ball, and he threw a ton of strikes, and we said, our strength conditioning staff is really good. We think we can mold him into a 93 to 95 mile per hour arm. I could take that guy, right? But the reality is now you have to look at it and say, can this guy provide innings for us on day one? Right? Can he step in and throw enough strikes and be competitive enough to provide some form of innings? And there's different levels of innings, right? There's your 10 up and 10 down guys. There's your ninth inning high leverage guy. There's your Friday night starter, right? So there are tiers, and maybe said prospect could fall into your 10 up, 10 down guy. But there's also the factor of, is that worth investing a spot on your roster to, in comparison to obviously being able to get a Division III guy who has years of experience throwing enough strikes to be competitive. And that's the guy that comes in and collects 20 innings for you. And even if he pitches to a 10 ERA in mop-up duty every Tuesday, but he gets you on the bus sooner, he saves you from using your Friday night high leverage reliever to get out of a jam or whatever it is, or in a blowout, you don't have to exhaust guys that have better stuff or more conference level capable of getting outs in a big game. Those are valuable roster spots, whether those guys throw 78 or whether they throw 98, right? Like, and I think that's the craziest shift now, is like, because everybody who's been in college baseball or been around college baseball, there's going to be multiple Tuesdays in the year where it's cold, it's late, you're up 10, you're down 10, and all you want is a guy that's going to go out there and just burn outs, right? However they get it. I don't care if you strike out the side or if you get 100 mile per hour line drive hit at our center fielder, right? We just need a guy who's going to go out there and eat these innings up 10 or down 10, and make sure that we're not burning guys that are valuable to us and having them exhaust their energy that we're going to need for Friday, Saturday, Sunday to compete for the games that, quite frankly, matter more, right, in the season. And I think that's the most fascinating part of the roster building, is the value of the bottom four on your roster is completely different.
Yeah, I think what makes it so difficult and so interesting is the fact that I think everyone can agree it definitely puts a strain on pitching staffs, right? Because there's limited innings for every guy, because everyone knows, like, typically the teams that play deep into the year, the teams that have good pitching. Everybody, if you talk to every single recruiting coordinator in the nation and you ask them, what do you need? Every single one of them is going to say pitching. It's the most important piece of baseball. Offense, yes, is very important. I don't mean to, say that offense isn't important. Hitting coaches are important. You guys matter, but like, without pitching, nothing works, right? Because you have to have guys that get you into the dugout that can throw strikes. Well, the challenging part of it is there's so many college baseball teams and everybody needs them. And the challenging part is that, what do college kids struggle with the most? Throwing strikes, having command, consistent command, week in and week out, outing to outing, inning to inning within outings. It's what makes college baseball kind of an any given day type of sport, where it's like, if you don't have a guy that can compete within the strike zone, you don't have a chance that day. Because free passes lead to big innings, like all these cliches, everything that everyone who coaches within baseball understands, anyone who watches baseball understands. And when you think about squeezing rosters at the big league level, or like roster size at the big league level, like, those guys are insane. Like, if you took the worst big league, the worst arm on every big league roster and put them in college baseball, their command would be better than just about everybody's. So those guys who struggle in Major League Baseball have ridiculous command when you just talk about the sport of baseball as a whole, right? So when you then talk about college, where everyone's command's a little bit worse, the guys at the bottom of college rosters, the biggest issue when you talk about the 10-10 guys in the past, when you guys talk about the guys who were the 45th player or whatever, it was probably a command issue. Like, a lot of them probably had stuff. They had one pitch at least where, like, it's like, this has really good traits. This could be an effective pitch. You just have to throw consistent strikes. So now when you squeeze it down, to your whole point, that works only if you can throw consistent strikes, like you said, and everyone's been looking for that forever. I don't think that more of those guys are going to exist. It's going to make it really tough because and some guys in college, like even your best guys, like your Sunday starter, your midweek guy who consistently throws strikes, when you're better relievers, sometimes they come out and it's like, well, they just don't have the zone that day for
Mm-hmm.
whatever reason. And that can really affect things when you don't have a number of arms. And we've all been in those situations where it just feels like nobody on the staff that day can throw a strike. And you're just like, I don't know, who do we turn to? And in the past, you probably had 20 pitchers, so you felt like you weren't going to run out. It was going to get ugly for sure, and you probably were going to lose. But like you said, you're just trying to get through that without having to maybe burn guys you don't want to. Um, Now, those guys are even more valuable. Guys who can eat innings, like you said, and that's like a term at the big league level, right? Like how many times do you see a guy at the big league level who puts up average like run prevention numbers or even maybe slightly below, but it's like they're always healthy. They eat innings. They go out there. I mean, Lance Lynn pitched until he was what felt like 60 years old because he was what was called an innings eater, because you could count on him going out there and getting outs. Because the fascinating thing, one of the interesting parts about baseball, obviously, and shocker here, but like there's no clock on the game. You have to get 27 outs, 21 outs, depending on, home, away, 7, 9, whatever, 24 outs in some situations. So like you need innings eaters to play your schedule. You need to get those that like at the start of the year, you can add up all the outs you're going to need to get through the season. You have to get them. You're going to need pitchers who can do it. Every single guy has to be able to do that in some capacity now. Whereas in the past, you had guys who, okay, so he has major command problems. We can keep him around and hope he develops it for a couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, and even to build off that of the developmental guys with the stuff is even like weight room guys, right? Like I think that's on both sides of the ball now as well. To build off of your point is the guys that you recruit, and it's like very evident and obvious. And I know college freshmen are stronger, more prepared to handle the workload and the strength that's required to succeed in college baseball than ever, right? The access they have to resources and places to develop physically in the private sector is more than it was 10 years ago, which is why these guys are more advanced when they step on campus from a physical standpoint alone. But there were always guys that like the middle infielder who had a ton of bat to ball and you really like the bat speed that he had, but it's more line drive, get it over the infield, fall in front of the outfield kind of hitter. And you're like, this guy could be a dude if we could just put him on ice for a little bit, right? Like put him on the back burner. We'll put him on ice. We'll let him develop. And by the time he comes out his sophomore year, maybe he's our backup shortstop. He plays some utility reps and he gets some good exposure. And then by his junior year, maybe he's even a draft guy if we continue to physically allow him to marinate, right? But now you don't have the luxury of doing that anymore. And I think of that on the pitching side, like, right, we've all evaluated pitchers and like, oh, we called it T-lap, right? Tall, long, athletic, and projectable, right? Like that's it. Those guys aren't even as valuable as they used to be because it's like, okay, great, we think he's projectable, but like projectable for what? Do we even have the time to project it out? Because there's both sides of the coin, right? Is he not ready to perform when he steps on campus? So that's a wasted roster spot. Or B, does he not like us? And even if we think he's projectable, we develop and he's off to another university to get that extra opportunity. So it's both sides too.
And you have to understand how projectable is he. Like, maybe he is projectable enough and he's got enough intangibles in there where like a fall gets him to be usable in some form or fashion. And then he can continue to develop. And that's what every coach out there is going to be taking their shot on. Right. And the hard part about that is it is projecting, which is why sometimes I get frustrated with even like prospect talk in Major League Baseball, because everybody's like, and it happens a little bit in recruiting. You love your recruiting board until you see them at 18 have to play against the 22-year-olds you have, right? And just like in prospect talk in Major League Baseball, every prospect is a guy that you can dream on and is going to be the next, Juan Soto, until he makes his debut and you realize how good big leaguers are, right? And like,
Mm-hmm.
so, projecting is really tough, but if you can get him to develop in a fall, then that guy's very valuable. You have to be able to know how to do that. And the thing that I don't want to get lost here too is like, yes, the portal, because I think when changes like this happen, what gets reported the most is like how many guys are leaving, how hard it is to hold a roster together. And, from the outside point of view, the transfer portal is a bunch of guys who have no loyalty anymore, who don't have the patience. But there's also the story of the guys, which I think is so fascinating. and I think it's important to talk about, is the guys that, we're saying that fall into this here. It's like the guys who no longer are going to have patient coaching staffs because they need people to develop. You sign at a school that's like a dream, and how important that is for you as a high school, and how exciting it is that you sign for a school and then you go there for a year and you don't develop quick enough, or it doesn't pan out and you're getting pushed towards the portal. You know, fans of college sports only look at it from the sport perspective. Fans of every sport only look at it from a sport perspective. For some people, having to pick up and transfer schools isn't like fun from a life point of view. And that's just the reality of it. And it's something that doesn't get talked about enough. But like getting pushed out because you have to transfer and pick up your life, you might have made friends, you're comfortable in classes, you just like the school, you like the campus. Like now you have a serious decision to make. Well, do I want to keep doing this? Do I want to stay where I'm at and give up baseball? Where am I even going to go? Who's going to want me? There's a lot of uncertainty in that. And it can get stressful. And the most attention always goes to the top levels. And it does, I understand, it feels like there's no loyalty and it's almost like a money chasing game and things like that. But there is a whole community of people who necessarily don't want to transfer. They're not getting paid a ton to be there. They have a scholarship. They don't have anything. There isn't NIL funds at every school. They're getting told that it's not working anymore. And that's a tough pill to swallow for an 18, 19, 20-year-old person. It is. Mm-hmm. It's not a fun position to be in. And that story doesn't get told as much.
Yeah, and I think it's mostly because everybody thinks that it's only the player's decision, right? Because the player's name is the one being entered into the transfer portal. It's not like Major League Sports where you can know when a player's released, right? Like when a player is released in the NFL, we get the notification saying that the Los Angeles Rams are not renewing the contract for said player, right? Like, and that's obviously a very evident decision from the business side of the, program or the team and obviously the university. But every time a player enters the portal, it doesn't come with the caveat of this player was pushed out. Like you're gonna and in bigger sports you're gonna hear some message board processed or whatever. But like in the reality is like all people see is all these players that are quote unquote selfish and out for their own entering the portal, because thousands are entering the portal each and every year. And nobody really knows the details, because now a coach, and even a coach with good intentions who got into the sport for the right reason and started coaching as a form of development for young men and being a mentor to so many different individuals, is held to the fire of a 34 cap, right? So if he's held to the fire of a 34 cap, not to mention at the bigger programs, majority of Division I programs, you're basically keeping your job if you win and you're not if you lose, right? Those scenarios that are obviously in place. If they're held to the fire of a 34 cap, they have to make a decision between, is this guy good enough to help us accomplish our goals and to keep me in my position and make sure that the team is heading in the right direction, or are they not? Right. And it doesn't even, like, to me, I think when you really view it from that perspective, there's nobody that's vilified in it. Right. Like, I don't think anybody's necessarily wrong. Right. And that's why I have a little bit more empathy towards players making that decision, because I get it to a large extent, the players at the top and wanting their opportunity to make more financial flexibility in the future. But the reality is coaches, even when they process players, it's part of this 34 cap, right? Like people don't even understand that. Like, yeah, sure, it's a business decision and they had to make a little bit of a selfish decision for their own success and on field. And maybe they made promises in recruiting that weren't held upon getting to campus. And maybe you had thought you were going to have an opportunity, and to a lot of players, that opportunity never came. And that is, venge filled. And you're going to have a lot of people in your corner talking bad about the coaching staff that processed you out. But the reality is if this legislative never came, that decision to get rid of you, which has always been a part, even when we had 40-man rosters, but now it's more evident because it's all public with the transfer portal. But that is now a decision that both sides have to make, where it's like, how valuable is this guy to the 1 through 34? Every player in the 1 through 34 now has to have value in some way, right? Like, even if that value is, like you said, you use the Lance Lynn example of like innings eater, like can get us 4 on a Tuesday in a blowout and not exhaust us of having to worry about when we're actually going to get out of this before we have to hop on a bus to go 3 hours home and then wake up and go to class the next day, right? Like there's value in that, right? These teams don't travel private. They don't charter planes. They don't just bounce from city to city like big leaguers do, right? Like there is value on a college roster of a guy that can get you out of a sticky situation on a Tuesday afternoon. And you might walk away still with a loss. And that kid might have an 11 ERA on the season and but collect 25 valuable innings for you because it helps you win on Friday. And like there is value in that 1 through 34 from that standpoint.
Yeah, and wouldn't you say it's fair that like the majority of instances of transfer portal, it's not a story of selfishness or, you know, either party being in the wrong? Is that fair to say? Like 95 to 98% of cases of people entering the portal is no one's in the wrong.
Are we talking about baseball specifically?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, baseball specifically, definitely, right? Like, no
Yeah.
question, right? Like, if you're a mid-major coach and you have a kid who blows up, freshman All-American, goes off in your conference, and they kick up to a bigger program, and you hold a vengeance towards them and animosity towards them, you're the problem. Like, I'm just gonna be honest with you because, like, again, like that's no different than if the Arkansas head coaching job opened up and you had a lot of success at a mid-major program, and when they came calling, you'd go to, right? Like let's view it from that standpoint. So I don't consider scenarios like that selfish in nature. So yes, 100%. I think that 95 to 98% of them are in that lens. I mean, if you're going, a kid who goes SEC to SEC, right, and it's obvious for a higher dollar and it's reported upon, those to a certain extent. But like even those scenarios, again, maybe I see the good in both sides too frequently. But like even in those scenarios, I sit there and I go, let's just say a kid transfers from SEC to SEC, and it's like, well, he went from a SEC program that almost lost their head coach, and he didn't feel like he was getting the development he needed. And he went into another SEC program and he became a first round pick and was an All American. Uh, are we going to fault the kid for doing that? Right.
Right.
Like even for more money, like he didn't feel like his developmental needs were being met at said program. And he thinks that another program is going to do it and that he actually goes out and does that. Are we really going to
Right.
fault the kid for thinking his development's better somewhere else? I don't. So, and yeah, 2%, less than 2% of the situations are selfish. Yeah, I would agree.
And even the other side of it, right? Even the side of guys being pushed out. Like, again, it's unfortunate in a lot of cases. And unless there was some sort of broken promises, which can get messy because it's a lot of he said, she said, or things weren't communicated well enough or whatever. Everyone's circumstances are different. But like, even the guys who have to have the conversation of, hey, it's not working out here. Like you said, especially at big programs, it's win and lose your job or win and keep your job. If you lose, you're losing your job as a coach, and it's like so you can see that side of the coin too. And again, I'm not saying those scenarios are easy on anybody because look, the majority of coaches are good people and they care about their players and their program. And when things don't work out, it bothers them just as much as it bothers the player. So in situations like that, those aren't fun conversations to have and it doesn't make anyone feel good. But, that's the unfortunate side of things. And that's the unfortunate side now of having a roster crunch. Like if you, it's turned way more into a business. And I think everybody understands that. Right. And it's turned way more into a business. And the business side of things can get gross. And it's a lot more difficult in college baseball right now where we don't see the general manager structure. Like those conversations are being had by the head coach. And again, like in almost every circumstance, the head coach cares about all of his players and wishes all of his players can be the best player on the roster. Like, that's the fact of the matter. Most of the coaches, at least the coaches we talk to, right? The ones that we know well, the ones we know really, really well, it's definitely this is the scenario. And there is no, in professional sports, like it's a GM agent conversation a lot of time, GM player conversation. That person is the bad guy. That's not the person you have to work with every day. That's not the person that you're going into the fire with, quote unquote, day in and day out, like you are with your coaching staff and the coaches are doing with their players. And so these conversations are so tough on head coaches where like they're having to deal with agents, they're having to deal with the player, they're having to deal with these conversations of, hey, it's not working out here, or the players having to walk into the head coach office. And I mean, there's definitely situations where players are, it's in their best interest, or someone's told them it's in their best interest, and they're entering the portal and they like their coaches, and that's a tough conversation. And I was a guy who transferred before the portal, not to make it about me, but like I wasn't transferring because I didn't like my coaches or it was some awful situation. I went and worked for one of my coaches afterwards, and he's someone I look up to this day and talk to all the time. Like I wasn't easy, like but there were other reasons for leaving. That happens, and that's the tough side of things.
Yeah, could you imagine if Tariq Skubal, who had obviously an arbitration hearing this past week, was like AJ Hinch is the one telling him he's not worth the dollar figure. And could
Right.
you imagine AJ Hinch actually thinking that his ace and multiple Cy Young
Right.
winner is not worth the money that he's worth, right? Like, and I know we had this conversation, and I think this is one of the off the record conversations, but I think it's prevalent, right? And we were talking to Dan Hefner about the general manager structure, and that was the thing that he highlighted as like the most important reason to have a general manager is just to like detach that like financial transactional part of the relationship, because he's so passionate about building relationships with the individual and the player, that like he just wanted somebody that could have those hard conversations so that he could still continue, because he's like, it's basically very hard for you to say you're not worth this and then let's go into the cage and I'm going to tell you how great you are. It's like, how confusing is that to an 18-year-old kid? Right? Like,
Right.
how could we want you and we love you, but the number you're asking for isn't worth it, or you're not worth a full scholarship to us, or whatever it is because of X, Y, and Z. And it's like, that is very hard. And there's really I mean, it's an impossible situation for coaches to be in. So when you talk about the transactional nature of that, it's very, everybody hates those, like, again, the guy that gets cut from the roster, like we all know somebody. They got cut from a roster and they badmouth the coach to no end, right? You hear stories about this all the time
It
in
happens at every
college
school.
baseball, right? Every school, every coach has players that hate them, all the stuff like that, because of a scenario that wasn't best for the individual. And the main people kind of leading that charge of that conversation are always the people in that player's corner, right? And there are two sides to every story in that scenario, where it's just like, yeah, that's part of the quote unquote business that is college athletics today. And but I do think that the general manager being there, or a front office personnel being there to have that conversation, is very important, right? Because
And
then when the coach is hard on the player or not hard, like, there's not
I
dollar
think what
figures hanging over both their heads.
no, and I think what's worse too is sometimes that message doesn't even come direct head coach to player. It comes head coach through an agent, which has to feel even worse. But like your agent's the one doing the bidding on your behalf, so that's the structure that is set up, and that's the only way that communication is going to come. And the head coach is going to tell, your head coach, who, like you said, you're grinding with, in the cage, or you're having meetings with, everything seems good. You want more money, and then you get a call from your agent saying, yeah, they don't think you're worth it, and you're like, what? Yesterday we, you know what I mean? And that makes the situation even worse. And again, it's not fun for either side. And and now you throw in the roster parameters, which it all makes, like, the fact that everything's trending towards a more professional structure makes sense, because it is becoming more getting paid to be there, so it has to. And these things have to occur, these conversations have to occur. We're going to shrink the rosters because we can't pay 45, we can't let the programs who can afford to pay 45 guys pay 45 guys, and then a bunch of other programs are being left behind. And it's like, it's a tough problem to fix. It's a scenario, it's a math problem, and I don't it's hard to answer. And
Yeah. Well, I think on the personnel management side, there's the obvious, right? Like, there is that is, it's a business, right? And we're becoming more professionalized when there's money involved. But this, again, processing of players was evident when we had 11.7 and your scholarship. Are
yeah,
you worth your scholarship? Pulling your scholarship, adding on to your scholarship. All of those things were decisions head coaches had to make. And that was when we had, 40-man rosters, quote unquote, where we were able to basically designate red shirts to go above the number and everything. So just the shrinking makes it more magnified, and really makes it where there's probably more scenarios that we're going to hear over the next few years. That's like, this player got cut from said program, goes to a mid-major, and is like conference pitcher of the year, right? Like that is going to be a story that you're going to hear very frequently. Oh, how could this lower level power four program let this kid go as their pitching staff willowed away the next year? And then a kid went to a mid major program and was like a stud, right? And like everybody's going to poke fun at that program for letting said player go. But like it's just like part of the roster manipulation that you have to do, that it's going to happen, and it's going to be more frequent because the rosters are smaller, right? Like
Right.
it's not going to be what it used to be. Was kid gets cut and he goes to a Division III programs and a stud, right? Kid goes, to Division I, he goes Power Four and then kicks back to the PSAC, and he's a local kid and he's close to home and he's an All-American for 3 years there, and whatever it is, right? Those were the scenarios that they used to be. Now it's going to be where like legitimate players are cut, like legitimate future studs can be cut from programs and released and go into another org or another program and thrive, right? Like that is going to be the structure moving forward. What I want to talk about a little bit too, because obviously we talked about personnel management, the importance of relationships, and obviously allocating your funds, is the in-season developmental part. I've had this conversation with a couple coaches recently, and it's being able to take said player. We've kind of talked about the seasoning, the marinating, putting them on the back burner. And obviously that's not going to be as prevalent now, but it's also giving them, the players, the artillery to succeed, right? In the given year that you're looking at. And I think it's fascinating because you used this example before, and I think it's a really good one of like, kid has a wicked slider, right? Like really good slider, really good one pitch. We think he could be an all conference starter if he was added 4 miles per hour velocity, where in the past we would take that kid and it would be like, okay, like you're on ice, right? You're going to work on that velocity. We're going to get you on the core velocity belt. We're going to get you a long toss. We're going to get you in the weight room more frequently, and we're not going to use you. Whereas, like, if that kid has a plus grade slider, he's now going out there and throwing 80% sliders for you on Saturdays and getting high leverage outs, right? So it really changes the structure of how you develop in the long term, of like taking what said player does now and not being able to look at like, well, if we have the developmental trajectory, we think he could be an all conference starter in 3 years. Now you have to take that kid and say, your slider is good enough to pitch now. You're going to throw your slider a ton, and we're going to stick you out there each and every day. Velocity be damned.
Yeah, I think the people who are going to be best at this are able to thread the needle of, this is how you're helping us now. This is what you have to do now. This is the guy you are now. This is how we're going to use you. This is where we think you can get, and still finding a way to work towards that while you're, in your example, while you're still going out there and being an 80% slider guy, pitching, getting outs out of the bullpen, but we still think that you can be an all conference guy down the road. And there's been plenty of examples of this happening, right? Guy, what's the trajectory? Freshman reliever, maybe midweek starter and reliever the second year, weekend guy the third year. That's going to be way more important because, like you said, if hey, we know you're going to need to build a mix to become that starter that we see you as down the road. But right now, you can go out there, you can be effective, you can get outs, pitching as a, backwards, however you want to phrase it, being a slider guy, being a spin heavy guy, surprising with the fastball late or whatever in certain situations. We'll build out the arsenal while we're doing that. That's going to take needle. Like you're going to have to thread that needle, and it's going to become way more important. And, you might have one guy who's on that path in the past or two. Now you're going to need a couple because, like you said, like these innings are just all the more valuable and all the more important because there's less guys for those innings to go to. So everyone's going to have to play a role and be able to chip in some form or fashion.
What's fascinating, the example that I go back to, and like Shocker, they're the banner example of this. It's and coming from our mouse, I guess maybe at this point it's probably null. But you look at Hagen Smith's
Exhausting.
development, right? Of just like Shocker, Arkansas, Coach Hobbs, they do something really well. And bounce between starter, freshman, really both his freshman and sophomore year. Starter, reliever, right? Mixing in struggles in an outing. They move him to the bullpen. He's dominant. Everybody's like, man, when this kid, really figures it out and starts throwing enough strikes, you're going to get, really good starter innings out of him and everything in general. And even you look at his like sophomore year highlights and it's like 93 from a low slot, generating a ton of whiff with his wicked slider, and he's just generating a ton of swing and miss and uncomfortable at bats for hitters. And it's like, well, what made Hagen the pitcher that he was his junior year? Well, his fastball bumps from like averaging 93 to averaging like 98. So how did he go from freshman year Hagen, where it was 91 to 93, to junior year Hagen where it was 98 to 101. Well, it's that balance between development and obviously exposure and opportunity, right? Hagen obviously had 2+ pitches from a 91 and 93 standpoint with a really good slider, and he threw enough strikes to be competitive in both a starter and a reliever role. But it was never this like he's going to go out there and punch out 20 plus in an outing and nobody's going to sniff the baseball. Well, the balance between it, and the reality is like this is where my head goes as a coach, and maybe you can push back on this. I think it's going to kill summer ball because like what do I owe? Like we might want to get this kid stretched out, but you know what's better for that kid if we think he's good enough to go out there and throw 80% sliders his freshman year? I need him to be with our weight staff all summer and gaining muscle, and we're going to basically nullify his fall of his sophomore year and basically just run right into the spring with a full 8 months of physical development and see where he's at in terms of velocity. Right? Like you want to talk about what's going to kill summer ball, most importantly, it's this scenario right here where it's like, when am I going to get the time to actually physically develop this kid to handle the necessary workload and make the strides from a developmental standpoint that we need him to? I'm not sending him to the Cape. I'm not. I want him in my house doing the development structure that we believe in with our strength staff. And I want to see what this guy can become under our watchful eye. And the Cape Cod is not going to do that for him.
Yeah, I think we're definitely trending in a direction of summer ball changing, going away. I don't know. I definitely think we're going there anyway. I think there's a handful of factors that are contributing to it. I think this could be a scenario, and I was certainly thinking the same thing because in the past, one of the big things for a lot of young guys and a lot of the maybe not the Cape Cod leagues or even the Coastal Plains leagues, some of these lower leagues, it was like, go get innings because you didn't
Mm-hmm.
pitch all year. We need you to
Yeah.
face hitters. You've been developing. Well, in this scenario, we're talking about how you're not just on ice developing during your college seasons. You're getting innings. So why do I need you to go get more innings? This is now your time in the summer to develop. It's probably better for arms as well. Honestly, like it's the calendar. We've talked about that a million times. It's weird, and it's certainly weird for pitchers too, especially with the summer ball structure as is and how it's been in the past. I just where's the best place for the off season? A lot of people like I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, I think this is now the time. Like, yeah, you need to be married to the weight room, throwing bullpens on a more measured routine. You threw innings for us. Like, hey, you threw 17 innings for us. I don't need you to go get more innings in summer ball necessarily. Like you said, yeah, we need to stretch you out, but like stretch them out in the fall. Stretch them out, leading up into this, from starting in the fall, leading up in the season. That's your time where you can start to stretch them out if that's the path that they're on and the path you need them to take for that spring. So yeah, yes, it's definitely going to be another factor. Again, I think there's a handful of things. I don't know if it's going to go completely away. I don't know if it's going to change. I don't know what the outcome is down the road, but I don't think, and it has changed already, right? It's starting to change, but I definitely think that like this, the way summer ball we knew it 8 years ago, 10 years ago, is going to be completely different. If not go away, like you said, because I'm I'm fully on board. If I was a pitching coach right now in college, I wouldn't want to send a single guy to summer ball. I'd want them
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
in our
Under your
facility or in a
watch.
facility. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we can get them, because that's the tricky part, is because you want to get them competitive reps in the fall. Okay, so if we look at the calendar, right, and we now know that the spring more opportunities are required because we just have less spots. So you can't marry a freshman with your strength conditioning coach for his freshman spring. He can't be crushing weights for the first 2 months of the season and then you have 3 injuries and you're like, okay, now we need to ramp you back up, right? Like and get you off this developmental track. No, they need to be in like a real life pitcher and preparing for like every Friday's a start day from jump. So now spring is like we've just lost a developmental window for young guys that would have been developmental pieces in the past. Okay, so then we send them to summer ball. You're not, I mean, we can argue till we're blue in the face here, but I know some people believe that you're not developing in summer ball. Like you're developing reps, you're getting exposure to opportunity, which can refine some of those intricacies that make you successful in game. But like from a developmental standpoint, physically developing stuff, repertoire, developing things like that, You're not getting better. Okay, well, so you run them out there for there, and then they get to the fall, and you want to see them compete against your guys under your eye. So that's what the fall's always been for. Okay, so that leaves how much time in the calendar for a weight room? 12 weeks. You
Right.
wrap up the fall around Thanksgiving, and then you ramp up until basically getting these guys on the mound in mid January, right? That's not even 12 weeks. It's 8, right? Like that is not an off season to develop. So what gets scrapped? Do you scrap the fall and give those guys the full fall of rest while handling a summer workload? I think we've seen a lot of programs that do that historically. You'll have starters come back for their sophomore year and not pitch in the fall, or come back for their junior draft season and not pitch in the fall. We hear about that a lot, and that's more of a developmental window, and you run that into the season and start your ramp up in mid-December because we kind of know what you are. But again, remember, we're talking about scenarios where we don't really know what these guys are, right? We don't know what they're going to be in the future. That's for guys that are coming back, and you kind of have a good sense of what their stuff and is, and what they're going to be in terms of their role. So what's the easiest to get rid of? I would get rid of, give me 3 months of summertime to be able to develop these guys, 4 months, ramp them up, get them out for the fall, see them compete, see what the strides are that they make, get them on a mound, get them, make some mechanical adjustments if that's what you want to do in the fall. And you're able to balance, because you still, a lot of programs still do lift heavy in the fall, and there is a large window of lifting heavy in the fall. And then again, you see what you have in December. I would rather have full control over that for 12 months of the year, and map that out for them than ship them off to some small town like you're saying. Like in the Cape Cod examples, those are your best of the best. Those are your number one draft picks, and your top guys, and from each program. Like we're talking about like the Valley League. Yeah, let's ship him off to the Valley and see what he comes back as. Let's hope that he didn't, find a buddy who likes beer and he comes back 20 pounds heavy, right? Like those are all realistic. Or let's ship them up to the Northwoods, where we hope and pray that their coach isn't abusing them because they're playing 65 games in 72 days. Like, let's just hope, right? Okay, yeah, if I was a pitching coach, I'd be like, we're not sending anybody anywhere. Sorry.
Yeah, unless the number one thing they need to develop is like developing the
Game reps.
competitiveness.
Yeah.
Yeah, like learning how to compete, confidence, stuff like that. It just doesn't. I don't see the value as much because again, if we are trending towards like player development is becoming massive in college baseball, and when you look at the schedule, it's like okay, we 12 weeks, 8 weeks, like we could extend this, and if the summer, and again, even if they're not on campus, if they're not in your facility, like if they're just in a controlled environment in one of 7,000, probably more than that, facilities that we have across the country now that are specialized in player development, it's a lot easier. So yeah, I I definitely think summer ball is going to change and go away. And I don't know if that's a good thing. I don't know. And I don't know what it's going to look like.
I don't know. I've never had a soft spot for summer ball. Just being honest, like I've never been one of those people. Maybe it's because I grew up in a different generation where the Cape Cod wasn't just like the main opportunity for guys to get exposure in front of scouts and collect information on these guys. I'm not. I don't have a nostalgia towards like shipping guys off to summer ball. I think from like a personal standpoint, like I've heard a lot of people that are like, it's the most fun I ever had, and it's like great, but that's not my job as a coach
Right.
who's
For sure.
offering you a scholarship and a roster spot to ensure that you had the best summer of your life. Great. Like I don't care, right? I need you to perform on Fridays and Saturdays in the springtime for that to matter in any way. So I do think that like a lot of people are reluctant to changing summer ball because there's some form of nostalgia. Like maybe they watched Summer Catch a couple years ago, and they're like, man, that sounds great. And it's like, whatever it is in that scenario that makes people believe that it's like it has to be a part of baseball. I don't lean on that side.
I
I'm not a traditionalist, as I'm sure
I
anybody who listens to this for an extended period of time is like, I'm not. I don't sit there and dream about the old times of baseball. So like, I'm not somebody who thinks the Cape Cod is like this staple of what makes baseball special. I think it's really cool, and I've been there for games. But like in terms of developmentally, I'm kind of anti summer ball in
I think it's
general of
more
like getting
so
guys to develop.
the romanticism of playing baseball in the summer.
hundred
where the
percent.
nostalgia comes in. I don't have.
In a
I've never
cool
had a strong
town.
opinion on. I've never
Yeah.
had a strong opinion on summer ball.
And the Cape is great, right? Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I've been up there. It's really cool in the structure of like the fields they play. Like, it's an intimate setting. It really is. Like, it's awesome. It's a beautiful place to go, spend your summer, all of those things. Like, I'm not taking that away from like what makes the Cape Cod special and the community that comes out for those games and the people that spend their summers on the Cape or the people that have traveled from all over the place. And obviously you have the MLB draft conversation, which again, that something like somebody in that space can tell me because I've evaluated guys through the 56 game college baseball season and felt like I had a pretty good grasp on what they were. I didn't need a wood bat to tell me if they could hit or not. Right. And I do draft stuff all the time. So like I've never felt like that has made it different. But if it's an opportunity to get more eyes on a guy, that's not even to mention the freaking fact that it's become a showcase event for bigger programs. So good, you're a mid-major who had a guy who wants to get draft exposure, so you ship him up to the Cape and he finds a couple barrels before the portal closes, and then guess who's in his ear? His buddy on his team from an SEC program, right? Like, okay, great. So that's an awesome piece of the puzzle as well for coaches who don't want to showcase their freshmen to the whole world, right? And their young guys or their superstars to the whole world. Yeah, because coaches are literally go up there to recruit. Like, if people don't know this, like we've been around coaches that are like, yeah, I'm heading up to the Cape, and it's like, oh, to check on your players, and it's like, yeah, to check on our players. Yeah, I got to check on our players in the Cape. Yep. Yeah, can't wait to check on our players in the Cape. It's like, yeah, sure you are, bud. Like, yeah, exactly. So again, like the whole structure of summer ball, because I've even seen this, and this is maybe a different conversation, but the whole moving the season back has popped back up, and a lot of the people that are against it are like people who sit on their couch and watch baseball. So like, okay, like whatever, like you're nostalgic towards summer ball. Why? Like what? And
Yep.
like that's their main pushback is this is going to kill summer ball. Why is it
Who cares?
okay? And at
If we're
the
pushing the season back, then who cares about summer ball? Summer ball doesn't matter. I just think that the pushing the season back thing
I
is a fight
agree.
that's never going to be won, even though I think it needs to happen because of the school calendar.
Debatable, but yeah, I think it
I just don't
is.
think I think the school calendar because I think you're getting like for baseball. I think it's again it would be the best thing that's ever happened to college baseball. My opinion. We don't need to be playing. You could extend preseason. Why play games on Valentine's Day? I think the for a lot of schools, I don't know. I just think that keeping them there every single year past maybe some I don't know how it would work. I just don't. I don't. Again, it's another thing that I don't know how it would work, but that's a
Another
different conversation.
conversation we can bear down on exactly what the details are. My understanding is you shrink the week of season, you push it back like roughly 3 to 4 weeks, so not much. I don't know how conference tournaments like hand up with the 64 team postseason, I don't give a crap about conference tournaments in the big conferences, right? So, and like a lot of the smaller conferences actually end earlier, right? Like, so there's that
Right.
factor as well into it. So, if we're shrinking the season a little bit, maybe condensing some games here and there, sprinkling in some midweek doubleheaders to get to our game number, and maybe eliminating some of the conference tournaments that happen on Memorial Day weekend, right? Because again, we know for a factor like some of the conference tournaments are like full week long, like kind of irrelevant to me in the grand scheme of things of whether those happen or not, like making those more condensed in the weekend before, and finding a way to get that down when then you run your regionals and maybe it pushes the season back a full week in the grand scheme of things. Like you can condense the schedule to make that happen and make that
If it's
work.
one
And
week, you could, yeah. But now you're missing again. I hate to play. This is a conversation for another day. We can do this some other time because this actually would make for
I'm kind of
probably a good
curious what you were
conversation.
going to say.
If you're cramming more in, now you're missing more class time. Which again, I know that we all roll our eyes from this standpoint and say, okay, because we really care about that. But administrators would care about that.
Well, the main pushback, and for those that don't know, the main pushback from extending getting the season into the summer, and Dan kind of hinted at this, is schools don't want to pay the people to keep the dining hall open. Like that
And
is a
dorms,
legitimate pushback. You and dorms and everything. Like
you
you
have to
think
keep the
that we
campus
might be
fully
laughing.
staffed.
Yeah.
Right.
You think you might be laughing thinking about that, but it is 100% the reason why this has never happened of like bleeding into the summer more. Um, I think but again, like it's for power four, right? Like the main thing that makes me think it's possible and reasonable, and again, we're just talking about this because it would kill the summer leagues anyway, is it makes the Big Ten a revenue generator in terms of like those schools will pack out that stadium if they have more opportunities in May to play games, right? Like that is the main motivator for it. I still think that there is issues with the college baseball calendar of like the ramp up time and keeping guys healthy and things like that at the early season, which I think are
The
legitimate
headache
concerns
of
getting.
weather
Yeah, getting 100%. Especially this year,
early
it's
in the
been a
year.
bad winter, which is why everybody's talking about it now because this is the first year that the ACC programs are all dealing with it. It's like, yeah, now
Yeah.
of course this thing is a problem again, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh
It actually
wow,
snowed in Alabama, so
yeah,
got a
it's like
problem.
all the southern programs who actually have a say in this thing was like, wait, like what are we gonna do? How we can't practice? We have to open in a week, and it's like, yeah, welcome to the Northeast and what Big Ten programs have been dealing with for multiple years,
Ever.
right? Multiple
Forever.
years, and so I do think that that's a factor in it as well. As that's why we're having this conversation now. Next year, when we have a warm winter again, you're not going to hear a peep from any ACC or SEC coaches that matter about this thing getting back into the conversation. But back to the roster construction, I think again, ultimately, I think we've kind of hit on everything that we wanted to hit on from a developmental standpoint, and then obviously a personnel management. But it changes things. It really does, and it changes the transactional nature of the decisions that both coaches and players have to make. It changes the recruiting structure of ensuring that players are ready when they step on campus, and you're giving that 34th roster spot to a valuable asset, not one that's maybe going to be valuable in 2028. It changes your in-season development of how you prepare guys for games and prepare for the longevity of their career. And it really creates a, muddy water in terms of what it actually is and what it can be. And the big thing that I'm anticipating this year is what happens when a staff has 7 injuries. I mean, that's not crazy to
Happens.
think about. It
No.
happens. And like what happens when 3 guys blow out, 2 guys get shoulder injuries, 2 guys are shut down with tendonitis, and you're sitting there with your like, what are we going to do? Now your roster's down to 27 because that's the thing about, again, we want to talk about like this decision was not made from a baseball lens. Like we need to emphasize that. Like this is not a baseball decision by the NCAA. This is an NCAA decision that impacted baseball, right? So if you look at 34 and say, well, that's very close to what the MLB has in terms of active and things like that. They have a whole minor league system. They have an IL structure. They have an active and an inactive. All of those things that professional orgs have.
Minor leagues to pluck from.
Exactly. Baseball in any college sport really, but baseball specifically, they don't have 17 guys that are on a developmental roster that they can pluck from. They don't have an injured reserve where they can add to that 34 by grabbing a kid from the club team. And once the season starts, like they have to stay at that 32 or 34. So it's going to be tricky. And we're going to see teams with preseason expectation who get the injury bug bad. And we're talking about like sub 500 club because they lose 3 pitchers. And like they're just running their guys into the ground because they have to, not because they want to. And it's going to be very interesting to see because this is going to be year 1 of the shrinking of the roster. And I know there's going to be ways to skate around it in the future that schools are going to be more prevalent on. But I think that's going to be fascinating. So we're going to see a lot of teams this spring that maybe, from an on paper standpoint look pretty good. But when injuries start to pop up and they have to tap into that roster number 30, 27, 28, 29 and start to chip at those guys and give those guys opportunities, we're going to see some teams really crumble in those moments.
It's gonna be unfortunate, and
Very unfortunate.
it's good. Like I don't think you're wrong. Like even if it's not all long term injuries, there'll be a week or two where you have, like you said, it's very possible. It's like not crazy to say like you have 7 pitchers hurt. And what does it look like now? And I mean, we've seen it happen to teams when the rosters were bigger. So that's going to be the unfortunate side of things. It's going to raise questions, and there's going to be a lot of outcry about it, especially if it's a big program, like you said, with preseason expectations, and it derails their season. And I don't know it's going to happen.
Here's a scenario for you. So you have pitchers are delicate, right? Some guys like every pain
Very.
in their arm is like shut down. They think they need Tommy John. As a coaching staff, what happens when we get the first conversation around a kid coming to a coaching staff saying that he's not feeling up for it, fatigued, feeling forearm soreness, shoulder fatigue, and a coaching staff sends him to the AT. The AT says, we have nothing, sends him to an MRI. And the coach staff turns to him and says, you have to pitch. When's that going to happen?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. It could
But
have happened
it
already.
could happen. It
Yeah.
could happen, and it probably will
I would
happen.
hope.
Where it's like,
I wish it wouldn't happen because you just. But I understand.
It's one of those scenarios
it could
where
happen. It might have already happened. We don't know.
Yeah.
Like it's. I mean, even before. But yes, no, it could happen.
But
Sure.
like it might have to be like very real of like, or even he has like a slight strain, right? And he is sore, and
I
but
hope
it's
we're
like,
not running anyone. Yeah, I hope that
but like,
never happens.
but here's the
you should be
scenario that
protecting
I'm saying, because I agree with you. But the reality is like, what if you only have 7 healthy pitchers?
You're finding a
Because your
position player that can
rosters
put
are
it
so
over the plate.
small.
My guess.
But to get through a 3-game series in a 4-game week,
I mean, I hope we're not running anyone out there that's injured. Yeah. If you're throwing
like,
someone
again,
that has a strain, you should lose your job.
Okay,
If
so
you
strain might be a
have
little
strain
bit.
and the kid is like, say, if in this scenario, a kid comes back with a minor strain and he's saying that he's in pain and he doesn't want to go and you're making him pitch, I would hope someone found out and you get fired.
What happens if they just have
Don't
inflammation?
Give a crap about the roster.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're gonna and that's good, but that's gonna have to be a decision that coaches are gonna have to make, where it's gonna be, okay, we're throwing our shortstop on Sunday afternoon because we're out of.
I wouldn't throw your shortstop, but yeah, I would throw my backup shortstop maybe.
Okay, but
yes,
you know what I'm saying, yeah.
Yes,
and that's gonna be
I think
weird.
that the part we didn't even get into on this is like two-way players are going to become much more valuable, and they're going to come
Yes.
back, and there's going to be a lot more of them. But yes, you better have, like, if every team out there hasn't at least, and I'm not kidding, and some might say this is a complete waste of time, but if you haven't at least identified who on your team that's a position player that can't throw strikes, like you're, I think it's risky. You should at least be identifying in the lead up to the season, like who could get out there and like throw strikes and get us through the game.
Your superstar high school freshman.
If you didn't do that, and you're running someone out there who's complaining of arm pain and comes back with a mild strain because you're telling them that the team needs you and you're giving that whole, Disney movie speech, I hope you never coach in baseball again for the rest of your life. Not even Little League. Get out of here. And if you're because in my opinion, if you run into a situation like that, and it's because I know we've talked about, well, Dan, you've been saying this whole time, if you win, you keep your job. If you lose, you don't. It's like if you work at a place where the athletic director is like, hey man, you're decimated by injuries, we're firing you because of it. Like, come on. I'm like, really?
True. No, I think every superstar high school player that's not going to be your utility infielder is, I mean, I know of a story. I talked to a college coach recently. It was like, yeah, we had a kid who was a pitcher at another university, but he was like a really good 2-way guy. We had him as a position player and we stuck him on the mound, and he was actually like up to 93. Like, and it was like,
yeah,
good
just
stuff.
you have to
like,
identify him, right? Because
Yeah.
there are, and I think it's even more important, like strike thrower. Obviously there's a floor of like velocity. Like even if it's like not 93, it's like 86 with strikes. Come on, baby.
Oh yeah,
we're going to use you at some point.
86, yeah. Oh yeah, I think 86 with strikes is more important than anything. Like, I think the strike throwing ability is like, again, on a Tuesday, and again, for people that have never sat at a Northeast college baseball game on a Tuesday afternoon when it's cloudy and there's a little bit of moisture in the air and it's a high of 38, only going down as the minutes tick away. When you're down 10 or up 10 in those moments, and the last thing you want is a guy who can't throw strikes. Like, there's nothing, like, the whole place will be mad at him. Both teams are booing him when a guy goes out there and spiking heaters and throwing balls and walking the yard when it's a blowout in either way. So, like, if a kid came out and was throwing 72 puss balls, now maybe he might get banged around the park, but at least people can wear that a little bit, right? Like, the defense is running around and moving, like everybody's,
and like
the other
team's hard. Someone's gonna fly out. Yeah, someone's gonna,
like, you'll get through it. And as long as he's throwing strikes and the umpire's opening up the zone, everybody's happy. So, like, again, even to that extent of like the mental fatigue of a guy rolling out there on a Tuesday afternoon and walking the yard, I think is going to be like, people are going to be like, why is this guy on a college roster? And it's going to be like, because of this right here. Because we're going to get this over in 45 minutes instead of an hour 45.
You're welcome.
It's good. And like, again, everybody at that park.
Everyone in the stadium, you're welcome.
Yeah, stadium.
Bus drivers included.
All right, Dan. Well, that was a fun conversation today. Obviously, college baseball season opens up next week, and maybe we'll have some examples to talk about of some developmental pieces and some things that are on our radar as we continue to kind of have more things in season to talk about. I think that's going to be the fascinating part of the next couple months. But if you're still listening to us ramble about running pitchers out on arm injuries and things like that that are probably going to happen, but we hope that they're not going to happen. Make sure you smash that subscribe button. We have a ton of fun content planned, and that'll do for this episode of the Baseball Development Hub podcast.